of AJ and Baldy to tackle a new What If. You see, this storyline involved a mystery reveal that was huge back in the later stages of the Attitude Era, taking the creative space of WWE programming for almost a year. This week, the panel answers, what if Austin's hit and run at Survivor Series 1999 was booked differently? Let us first echo the thoughts of literally every other wrestling fan who knows what they're talking about by discussing how much of a botch that reveal truly was. Besides Jay Shergill, no one else was impressed nor excited about how it all went down. And then we discuss what if things went differently. But first, as always, a check-in question to get things going. Today, to create a perfect segue into our topic, I asked the panel what their favorite wrestling mystery reveal is. I'll start things off. And I won't mention the heavy favorite of Bash at the Beach 96, and I'll let Baldy have his favorite cherished moment of Mae Young's baby reveal, as he was her biggest fan for all the wrong reasons. Instead, go 1 year later, Bad Blood 1997. Yes, one of the many things that WWE got so perfectly right. I'm referring to the reveal of Undertaker's younger brother, Kane, who made his debut alongside Paul Bearer, rest in peace, and wreaked havoc on the cage, on the Deadman. Everything about this was just perfect for me. Great build-up, a Paul Bearer montages leading up to it, the music, the red lights, the mask, the cage door. It had it all. Baldy?
For me, I think that's a great one. For me, the one that really stands out, probably my favorite, is Jericho's debut. I love the countdown, but an underrated one that I really love, being spoiled, was Taz's debut at Royal Rumble 2000 against Kurt Angle. Opponent for Kurt Angle, and it was too bad that it was spoiled, so the fans started chanting Taz, Taz, Taz. But when his music hit, that was quite a pop at some of the greatest pops ever. But that one was the fact that Taz, coming in former ECW champion. So for me, it's definitely Taz's debut.
That's an interesting one. I mean, it's not one that I'm particularly memorable, but I thought you were gonna say Kurt Angle being Jason Angle's dad, but okay, I will go with that one.
I like the Taz one too, because like you mentioned, he came in scorching hot from ECW.
Yeah.
And people believed the hype of this guy was like this devastating machine. So seeing him in
when
the
you think
WWE
of
ring was
pops, though-
amazing.
And Angle was undefeated at the time too. So for him to kind of come in and get a win over Angle, it was quite huge, but then he was buried shortly after.
I do like that as an underrated one, though. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. For me, I was probably Y2J when he came out. That they executed that perfectly with the countdown, with the Rock being in the ring and him selling it, the music, everything, right? Like they did nothing wrong with that one. But just to be a little bit different, I think for me it would be seeing him in the WWE ring was something that you thought you'd never see, especially with the bad blood between him. So seeing him and just the shock that I had, for me, that was most memorable.
Yeah, that one was definitely well done. Like wrestlers didn't even know, and they kind of had him hidden backstage, and it wasn't until he showed up that like it was genuine shock amongst the wrestlers. That one was definitely done very, very well.
That one they kept under wraps so perfectly well.
So well.
But like you mentioned, just seeing that iconic hug between Eazy-E, Eric Bischoff, and Vince McMahon, two sworn bitter enemies.
That was quite the sight.
Yeah, it was amazing, and no one would have expected that to happen in a million years.
Exactly. So now, before we delve into the episode, thought it'd be kind of good to just kind of touch base with what's kind of going on right now. Survivor Series pay-per-view and the 30th year of Undertaker being in the company and him debuting back in 1990 at Survivor Series. So today was supposed to be farewell. Baldy, I know you watched it. I've heard some pieces of how they kind of handle it, but as far as I know, Undertaker was really just involved near the end, right?
Exactly. Like he came out towards the end. Like I felt so it was supposed to be a 4-hour show, The main event wrapped up just at about the 3-hour mark. So it got me thinking, okay, 1 hour left. Like, are they really, like, what are they gonna planning on doing? And then they started off with like introducing, like, some long list of legends, including Savio Vega and the Godwins. But then the strange part was they all came, didn't say a single word, stood in the ring, and then Taker came out. Longest. I think this was probably one of the longest. Milk this one to kind of kill time on the pay-per-view as well. And said, I've made a lot of souls, rest in peace. But then it's,
like, what made the entrance so long?
Like they did a lot of they did kind of like a promo video highlighting his career, and it was a lot of too. And then I think he walked slower than he normally does. So like if you watch it,
and this was just at the like normal HQ, right? That the SmackDown and Raw.
Yeah, it's the Thunderdome. I think it's in somewhere in Florida. Yeah, so Thunder. I liked if they didn't have anybody else come out, it would have been perfect. Kind of took away the fact that everybody like it was a long list. Like it was Triple H, Shane McMahon, as I mentioned, Savio wins. I think there might have been a couple of the people. Like they had everybody came out, and then Vince came out afterwards. He said a few words, which was nice. Like I feel like everybody else was very necessary. Like they should have just had Vince come out, say his spiel, and let Taker come in, and then farewell. And it's like it's time for the Undertaker to rest in peace. And then what I found really cool was when he did the Undertaker pose, and they had a Paul Bear hologram show up in the ring. It looked like he was doing. It was in the ring. So Taker was in the ring, and then they had the hologram. That was really well done. And then Taker kind of did a long exit, and then that was it. So that was really well done. I just didn't like the whole everybody else coming in, but then not really.
He was doing this whole thing.
I think they just stepped outside the ring. So they all came in, kind of hugged each other, high five. Yeah, that was really well done. Like it kind of defeated the purpose of having everybody else show up. Like I get, want to show your respect, but just not saying anything or just showing up, and the lights were all out when Taker was in the ring, so you couldn't even see anybody outside. So, but otherwise, it was really enjoyed it.
That sounds interesting, Baldy. But do you think that tonight is the last that we'll see of the Undertaker?
It was the perfect farewell, but I don't think so.
But he's had so many perfect
I know that's why that's my whole thing.
And we're at WrestleMania when he put his gloves in the ring. That was a perfect farewell. Yep. So do you actually think this is going to be it for him?
I think his in-ring career is done, but I think just like all the other legends do, every so often he'll pop up. But yeah, I think he's done being a regular character, but I think every so often when they have like these special shows, I pray to God he doesn't come back for another Saudi Arabia match. But then again, they throw enough money at anybody, they'll show up. But I think that he may make the odd appearance, but for the most part, I think he.
Have you heard any like rumors about him potentially coming back?
Like initially there was talk of him possibly being the fifth member of one of the teams, but then they announced a fifth member on SmackDown, so that rumor went away. That would have been interesting if that was the case, but
no, it wouldn't have, Baldy. Stop it.
Honestly, man, you got to be interesting. You got to stop the madness on that one. Like AJ said, the WrestleMania send off where he puts his gloves down was so good, man. Being there live, it was so emotional.
Did you know that WrestleMania 30, the day of the show coming in, he thought he was going to win?
No, I didn't hear that. Was this during the Austin interview afterwards?
No, that was him and Kane sort of sat down and just talked about, how their careers intersected, and then they talked about WrestleMania, and they both agreed that, Roman Reigns should have been the one to end the streak. And the fact that Taker said that when he came in the day of Mania, he was projected to win, and then at some point during the day, Vince came up to him and said, "Hey, we're going to make Brock's going to end up ending the streak," and Taker was like, "Are you sure that's what we want to do?" And Vince was just like, "Well, if it's not going to be Brock, like who else do you really expect it to be?" And Taker was like, "I don't know if Brock needs it," which he didn't, but Vince, stuck with.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that interview, and I don't want to make this into a Taker episode because it could easily be that. But that's an interesting one. I definitely want to watch it. Yeah, I'd be surprised, man. Very surprised that they told him the day of. But going back to AJ's point about bringing talent back, like Baldy alluded to, I think the only way he does come back is those stupid Saudi Arabia shows where they just literally throw dump trucks of money. Which
they probably will. If they're still trying to get Yokozuna and the Macho Man, they will definitely throw a ton of money at the Undertaker. No, they seriously the guy that he has no idea who's around, who's alive, who's not. Like, so he'll throw a ton of money at the Undertaker once he finds out he's still alive.
But as good as that Mania match was, though, I also feel like that AJ Styles match at Mania was so well done.
Yep.
And it was catered to the limitations that Taker has.
Exactly.
So it was a perfect send off, him going off on the motorcycle and everything else.
Yep.
So it did end well, but again, Baldy, you'd have to be a madman to be like, I hope Taker comes back.
Yeah.
Some things they can put to bed.
No, now like this was right send off. I hope he
For sure.
stays away
He's
now.
done it all. He has said many times over that he has a hard time saying no to Vince, and when Vince needs him, he'll always be like a company guy and say yes.
Yeah. But even Vince was shedding a tear when he was, saying for the final time, I give
God,
you the
you act like
Undertaker.
it's the first time
I
Vince
know.
shed a
I
freaking
know.
tear.
Well,
Like,
well,
shut
well,
up, man.
hold on,
Baldy's
hold on,
watching
hold
this,
on,
Oh
hold
my
on,
God.
oh my God, this
Can
is
you
for
believe it,
real.
guys? Vince
How-
cried.
How many times have you seen Vince come out and say the final farewell for anybody?
I don't know. I can't actually recall.
Exactly, because
But
you
that still
have
means
to.
absolutely
But
nothing because Vince
who
is
has really
also
had a
doing.
farewell though?
That's the thing. Flair, but then he came.
Flair had an epic send off.
Flair's send off was so epic, and then he went and had matches with Hogan in Australia and ruined it. But
Yeah, and he kept coming back and coming back. Well, who
Yeah.
else does that? Oh, that guy Hogan. Yeah, he never seems to go away either.
he's never
Until they
actually
literally
officially
shut the
retired.
door in
So
his face. That's
he's
why.
never actually officially retired. So
Yeah, Baldy's waiting for his return match. Maybe you can have him and Taker square off at Saudi Arabia.
Let's get into this topic. So who drove over Stone Cold? It was all over 1999 Survivor Series going into 2000. But before we kind of get into who drove over him, Baldy, do you want to maybe just touch in terms of what kind of going on in terms of the events leading up to the 1999 Survivor Series, with Stone Cold basically being gone after that pay-per-view about a year?
So it was basically, in a way, it was sort of like a dream match that was set up for Survivor Series 1999. It was a triple threat match between Stone Cold, The Rock, and Triple done before. And then Austin was due for neck surgery at the time.
Right.
And so that was the whole reason for him taking time off. But, it is best to kind of push it. But they figured it would have gotten worse had he not got the surgery.
A lot of people know that he was going away for neck surgery, or was it not?
Not a lot of people knew.
Yeah,
They kept it sort of hidden in, hence why, that the done at the pay-per-view wasn't done beforehand. So it was at the pay-per-view where they showed Austin and Benny was run down. So they tried their best to sort of keep it hidden, but at the same time, go into the pay-per-view. Like, they still wanted the pay-per-view buys. They also had a feeling, had they done it beforehand, the pay-per-view buys wouldn't have been as high was on there, and having Austin come into the building, and that's when he gets run down. And yeah, like you said, Austin was off for quite a long period of time. Like, he came in April at Backlash, and then he was gone again until closer to early fall, when he ended up sort of becoming a regular again. And by that time, it was revealed who was driving the car.
Yeah, and he basically just shit out of him.
Exactly, that's what that was.
Okay, so going into today's episode, talking about who ran over Stone Cold Steve Austin at the 1999 Survivor Series. So there was a lot of this storyline was huge from 1999 to the 2000s. Everyone was talking about it, and so before we kind of delve into how we would have booked who should have ran over Stone Cold, Baldy, do you want to maybe just touch on like what were the events leading up to that pay-per-view and kind of what was going on?
So what a lot of people didn't know was that Austin was due for neck surgery right around that time. But it was one of those things where they didn't want to take him out of the pay-per-view too early on, because then, it would have taken a hit to pay-per-view buys. So they had actually scheduled the main event, which is sort of like a dream match of a triple threat match between The Rock, Stone Cold, and Triple H, which had never been done before. But then at the beginning of the pay-per-view, that was when they had the whole run-in attack with Austin. So, fans thought it was I don't know, fans thought it was real, or fans were like, what the hell? Like, he was supposed to be in the main event. So that way, when they sort of did that, like, fans were already tuned into the pay-per-view. And it's one of the things that Bruce Pritchard always says is, if you want to take out someone, you kind of want to make sure it's somebody bigger. But in that case, Austin being the biggest name out there, they couldn't really find any way to replace him. So they sort of had Big Show jump in, and as a sort of a shock value, they had Big Show win. But, the main storyline everybody came out of talking was, who ran over Stone Cold. And like you said, it lasted for quite some time, where Austin showed up at Backlash 2000 in April. And then it would be later on, like towards late end of the year, where he finally found out who it was. And then he started returning into in-ring action. So it was quite a severe injury.
Yeah, and so maybe I guess we'll just kind of talk about it. So basically, they went with Rikishi being the one who ran over Stone Cold.
Yeah.
And he basically, as he infamously said, he did it for that Rock. Like, so what? And maybe I'll start with you, TJ, first. Why do you think Rikishi being unveiled as the one that ran over Stone Cold failed so miserably?
Lots of reasons. The biggest reason is, first off, it was Rikishi. It was
Right.
out of absolutely nowhere. And I get that they had a very limited talent pool to go with. This isn't like the ruthless aggression era where you had so many people to choose from. So you were limited. But to bring in this guy who literally was known for nothing else but his thong, his stink face, and a big dude dancing around, and out of nowhere try to catapult him into like a heavy hitter main event kind of guy overnight, it made no sense to me. And I know people always talk about like, oh man, they got to bring these new faces and everything else, but it was so sudden and it was out of the blue where now you wanted this like happy-go-lucky guy, and he did it for, wait a second, The Rock, because he didn't want The Rock to be held down. Wait, what? Like The Rock was being held down at that point in 1999. He's going into a triple threat match at a marquee main event with two of the top guys, but you feel like he's being held down, your fellow Samoan brother, like from Austin. And so, and then The Rock's not even in on it. And then to make matters worse, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but they use Rikishi as a scapegoat to then ultimately, when they realized it was a botched idea and no one went for it, to be like, oh, by the way, it was actually Triple H.
That's
He
what
was
I
a
was
puppet
just about to
master,
jump into. Yeah.
you know, and he was the guy doing it because they want, and it was a great pivot on their part. I'll give them that,
But
because it built up a great storyline between those two. And we got some great storyline work with Austin and Triple H. But trying to just literally shove this guy out of absolutely nowhere down our throats and make him into this drastic mega heel that wasn't even working with The Rock. It was just bizarre. It made no sense. And it was literally like something that they decided at the last minute to be like, why not? I mean, if we can do a bait and switch at Survivor Series, if we can bring in our top guy and like not give him the match that everybody paid for, why don't we do this too? What the hell?
Yeah, that sounds exactly like what happened. Like, I mean, like you said, the choices may have been limited, but I feel like they could have done something better and, you know, instead of Rikishi. Like, I feel like if Big Show was going to be thrown in, why not make Big Show be the one to take him down and then, ultimately, take a spot in the match? Like, I feel like there could have been so many different ways to do it. At least Big Show was sort of like more mainstream and more of a headliner compared to Rikishi.
Yeah, but the only thing with Big Show, with Big Show being that was a popcorn kernel. That's what I get for eating popcorn during the podcast. But I think the issue with Big Show being the one who ran over Stone Cold would be just the fact that it was so obvious, or it was pretty obvious early on that he was one of the suspects because he was the one that benefited from him being out. So I don't know if I would have gone with the Big Show, but okay, maybe Baldy, I'll start with you first here. Who do you think should have been the one to be the one that ran over Stone Cold?
See, in these kind of things, like I like new debuts, and like right around the time this group of individuals debuted around that time, but this is how I would have brought in the Radicals.
Ooh,
I would have.
interesting. I
Yeah.
thought you were gonna go with my idea, but I'll let you run with this.
I would have had the Radicals debut because they were leaving WWE at the time, and it could have been a long mystery. And I feel like you could have gone so many different directions with the four of them. And obviously, like I think Benoit would have probably been the one to hit mainstream the fastest. But I would have gone with the Radicals and sort of built up the story of them sort of showing up and like debuting, like maybe not obviously not at Survivor Series, but they sort of showed up in early 2000, right around the time Austin was due back. So I feel like had they done it properly, that could have been such a great storyline.
So who would you have been the one that was driving the car out of the four?
Ultimately, it probably would have been Benoit, but I feel like you could have gone so many different ways with the four of them.
Like, it's interesting. You know what I thought you were going to say? Yeah. And it could have worked because I like the Radicals idea. It would have been a great way to bring them all in. And instead of doing like, I have them attack Austin, but not do it as like a hit and run car thing.
Yeah, you could have done so many different ways, but I think that would have been the best way to be like, you make your mark on, you go after the top guy. Like you're coming in from, WCW, want to make an impact, you go after the top guy. Yeah, I feel like they may not have had to go the car route. Like, you have a group of guys like in mass come attack them, or like however, like so many different ways you could have done that. But I feel like the Radicals would have been the right
You know how many
choice.
times they've had a person literally cut to let's say they cut to a superstar and he's like laid out
Yeah,
and he's like blood low and like who did
exactly.
this? What
Yeah,
happened?
exactly.
I should have swore I saw a couple of people and it's like, what do you mean a couple of people attacked him?
Yeah,
This is getting more and more bizarre. And if you're gonna drag this out for 11 months,
yeah.
what better way to be like, I saw 2 people. Actually, this witness saw 3 people.
Yeah, and then imagine you lead into like, how they actually debuted where the 4 of them are just sitting in the front row and it's like, oh, well, there was 4 guys that attacked Austin. Oh, wait, where did these 4 guys from WCW just randomly show up to a Monday Night Raw in the front row? Like, I feel like they could have done so much with that and ran with that storyline.
I like that Radicals idea. I don't know if I see, and I'm like, it's controversial to say nowadays, but like I was a big Benoit guy.
Yeah, me too.
With how he came up and everything else about him. I don't know if he would have been. He is the biggest guy out of that group.
Yeah.
To go after a guy like Austin, but Benoit, I don't know if he was ready for those promos and everything else.
That's probably the only thing, but I feel like with the 4 of them, like maybe you could have had sort of a mouthpiece. Like I feel like
That's
coming in, the 4 of them would have needed a mouthpiece, and like
for sure.
that person could have, who knows who it could have been, but again, that person could have started defending him, or like he could have gone so many different ways. But yeah, Benoit, that group definitely would have needed a manager.
Yeah, having a manager speaking on their behalf, that would be interesting. And not only that, but you can even present it as like, he's almost like I'm assuming it's going to be a he, but this person can also be like their defender, their attorney, their, let me stand up for their rights. You're unjustifiably accusing them, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, like it could have gone so many different ways. But like just like when we initially pitched the topic, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, they sort of debuted right around that same timeline. So I'm like, imagine instead of Rikishi, it was these 4 guys that attacked Austin, and they suddenly show up on Monday Night Raw, and they're 4 WCW guys. And ultimately,
dude, it could have been Perry Saturn, and I would have been happier than Rikishi.
Yeah,
okay?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting choice, boy. I did not think that you'd be going there, but now just kind of thinking logistically, would that have worked? Like, because then, like, based off their contracts,
they showed up they were released in late 1999. But I mean,
no. They showed up on January 31st.
No, but my point is, like, even though that happened in Survivor Series, like, I don't know how far in advance they were in contact with WWE. These sort of things, like when they know they're going to get released, like there's obviously some sort of clause. So maybe had they known, but I mean, it's not like they would have obviously been them. You would have just needed 4 guys in masks, and it could have been.
You don't even need the mask. That's the beauty of it.
Saying,
yeah, you could have had 4 guys. Anybody.
You don't need anybody there. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
You don't need them physically there to make the storyline progress.
Exactly.
The one thing that I'm thinking though is like, what if by October they are not in contact with WWE? Like, what if
that's the only thing. Yeah, well, that'd be that. Well, that's sort of the whole logistical thing. Like, you don't know when they would had word with WWE, or when the contracts and stuff were signed. But that was just sort of something that crossed my mind. Like, hey, that would have been a really cool way to bring them in.
No, I actually like that a lot.
Another out could have simply been, instead of doing, let's say, a hit and run thing, doing that exact same scenario of having them laid out, bloodied and whatever, and simply saying who did it. And then let's say later on down the road, if by chance the Radicals are in the equation for like bringing in talent, then instead of going with one person, you go like, why don't we make it a group? Why don't we make it a faction that attacked him?
Yeah, like
you have that flexibility to go either way.
Anybody would have been a better option than Rikishi.
I agree. I like that, but for me, there's a little bit too much of a big if in terms of whether or not WWE knew that they would be able to sign them or not. So like that's the only.
I agree. I like the idea. I was jumping all over it, but I do agree. It is a big what if in terms of like who knows what could have happened.
Exactly.
So TJ, who were you going to go with?
I thought Baldy and I were going to agree again. We needed like some sort of like ringer or a sound of some sort every time we happen to agree, because it's quite miraculous. But I thought the way he was setting it up in terms of like, hey, there was a debut. It was a debut around Survivor Series.
I think we're going with the same one here.
100%. What better way than to have Kurt Angle
Bingo.
As a guy who ended up attacking Austin? This would have instantly expedited him and shot him into the spotlight of like the main guys. You were desperate for talent at that point.
Yeah,
and
but
with Austin coming back, let's say it was like an 11-month storyline, was it not?
Yeah,
11,
it was
almost
quite long.
a year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Almost a year.
And Austin didn't almost return until what, the next year Survivor Series?
Like,
No Mercy.
in competition, No Mercy. It was like October.
October. So they could have held off. And then if they made it so that Angle, Austin at Survivor Series, or Angle reveals himself at Survivor Series the following year, however which way you want to do it, but him being the guy and then saying, hey, by the way, that was my debut. I was a guy who ran you over. Whether
Yeah,
they, you know what I
that's
mean? That could have worked. And then they could
Yeah.
have either potentially set it up for Survivor Series or dragged it out
yeah.
into Mania 17.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really I didn't even think about that. But that right
Now,
there, that's a really good one. But for me, I liked Kurt Angle's natural succession in terms of how he debuted and the crowd just started booing him, and like I liked how he wasn't thrown into the wolves. I think it would have been tough for him coming in not really having sort of the sports entertainment background. Like, yeah, he was an Olympic wrestler, but I feel like he needed time to get his act together and just for the fans to start hating him more and more. And I like how, he went through the European title to the IC title to eventually, what's funny is at that No Mercy pay-per-view that he actually won the WWF title. So I liked Angle's succession of how he sort of grew through the ranks in that year. So I personally, I don't think it would have been a good idea to push him right to main event status
You
right
know what
away.
the counter argument to exactly what you're just saying is? All of
yeah,
that, what you just mentioned, all that
yeah,
you loved about Angle coming out and doing his thing and progressing at his own rate could have happened because
you could
Austin
have had
wasn't
that.
there.
He could have,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You
Austin wasn't going
basically
to be there. He could have been the guy like the wolf in sheep's clothing the entire time.
yeah,
exactly.
no, that's
You like
true.
basically could have had that same type of growth that you're talking
It's
about,
true. And just
and then at
have
the
him
end
maybe
of
on the
that
go. Yeah,
year, kind of have that as like the cherry on top. Like, you know what, I did all this, and this is how I got here because I was the one that
yeah,
drove over Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then the fans at least would kind of feel like, well, that was a really good payoff. We didn't like think about it, right? Like this guy who kind of had this like year where he kind of did all this, and like he was the one that did it, and it all started from like his like debut pay-per-view.
yeah.
I
No,
think
it does make sense.
And it would have
I
been like, yo, man, it's this goofy, funny guy that we were chanting, this guy sucks. This is the
yeah,
guy
Yeah,
who was flaunting his gold medals in front of us, talking about
yeah.
how great he was. And he ends up doing this. And what a great heel run it would have been for him,
It would have been.
as now as a vicious heel. And
Yeah.
for them, they would have looked like masterminds to be like, yo, we thought this thing out a year and a half in advance.
Yeah, no, that would have worked out. That would have worked out really well. But how would you, though, thinking logically, if let's say you did go that route, how would you have changed the No Mercy pay-per-view? Because that was where Angle sort of had his crowning moment as being WWF champion for the first time. What would you have done differently then?
I think you probably would have just held Stone Cold out a little bit longer as opposed to bringing him in at that point, and then maybe doing it at the following pay-per-view. Like I don't think you need to essentially do it at that pay-per-view where
Yeah,
because that was a pay-per-view that he won the title, right?
yeah. So he won the title, and then he had a couple defenses, and then he ultimately lost it to Rock a month before WrestleMania, and that was when they built
Yeah.
Rock and
Or
Austin at
like what
Mania.
you could do is just basically not have Stone Cold come in and then him win the title and then like kind of celebrating and stuff and then like taking the mic and just cutting like a mean promo with
Yeah,
him
that could have worked.
like basically saying, like that's right, Austin, it's true. I'm the one that like ran over you, and I
That
think
would
that would
have
have
that
been
would have
super
actually that would,
memorable.
yeah. And you think about it, that would have worked out. That would have worked out quite well.
And it would have caught into his slogans of like, it's true,
That's
it's
true.
true
Yeah.
kind of thing. But that would have been, I think, the best way. The radical seems kind of cool.
Yeah.
I was all
No.
over it. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, there was a lot of like, who knows what was going on
Yeah.
backstage with the negotiations. But the Angle one would have made so much more sense.
But
Yeah,
I
I
think like
slipped my mind that Angle debuted at Survivor
I
Series
think
'99.
though
Oh, we got one over Baldy there. The historian
I
forgot
think
about Angle's debut.
I think the only knock though that you can say about the Angle one is though I don't think the company really knew what they had in him
They weren't
to
planning a year in advance. Yeah.
basically be like he'll be the one that like
Yeah.
drives over Stone Cold. I think him kind of catapulting himself into like a main card draw over that year. I don't think you could say that a lot of people in the company expected that. So I think to say that they would have had the foresight to be like, like he'll be the one to like run over Stone Cold, and like it'll be this big payoff because he just wasn't really that well known as you mentioned, Teed. So
Yeah.
I think there is a bit of that unknown with Kurt Angle, and kind of giving him that like goodwill, not goodwill, but that type of equity in terms of him being the one that drives over Stone Cold. So I think maybe that's why they didn't go with Kurt Angle because he had a massive question mark on him.
But again, this goes back to what Baldy was saying earlier in my exact same response to him. If you're going to have 11 months of literally nothing going on and you're going to wait 11 months to reveal who this person is, that gives you 11 months to decide who the hell you actually want to be the person. So in those 11 months, as Baldy perfectly mentioned, you saw the illustrious career of Kurt
Yeah.
Angle take off. During
Oh,
that
okay.
time, you could have easily looked at him and been like, hold on a second, we were going to go with this Rikishi dude,
Gotcha.
but now we got this guy over here And
So
we
they
haven't
just
really
switched
committed to
gears.
Rikishi. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
This is
even if they were going to go with like the whole Billy Gunn, whoever it was, that said, "Hey, I saw blonde hair,"
Yeah.
yeah.
put a wig on. Like you could do so many different
Yeah,
things.
like this is one of
True.
those topics I would love to see Bruce Pritchard covered and see how long in advance they knew or when they knew, and then it's kind of like it'd be interesting to see what their timeline would be of when exactly they decided it was going to be Rikishi. I don't think he's covered this in any of his podcasts,
I
but I'm
think
looking
they
forward to.
must have known at the start that it was going to be him, just
I
because.
don't think so.
Really?
I doubt it too, man. I
Considering what
highly
Bruce
doubt it.
says, he says they don't plan this far in advance. Like they'll have
Yeah.
storylines, but then they kind of
Uh,
wing it, and then closer to they're like, "Hey, we think that's a perfect." Like there's no way. I don't think they plan that far in advance.
Because do you remember when they started dropping clues like about the blonde hair and stuff like that?
It wasn't until I think Austin was close to coming back, because like when he came back, that was when
But
he
then
sort
how
of
did they
started his
keep
own
the fans?
investigation.
But like, how do they keep the fans so in tune? Because I remember being like invested in the storyline over
Because it
that.
was always around, and Mick Foley was on his like never-ending pursuit
Yeah,
mission
Foley
to
was on his
find out who it
pursuit, and
was.
then when Austin came back, it kind of went full force. Like they stopped it for a couple months because they were busy with Bossman invading Big Show's father's funeral, Big Show jumping on the casket. So they sort of had that sort of taking place in the meantime, and then once
Yeah.
Austin came back, then it sort of went full fledged.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. But I think just kind of having that talent, I think Kurt Angle was the perfect one. And kind of like what TJ said, like if they did think, for example, if they did somehow think that Rikishi would have been the one to drive over him, and you see all the great stuff that Kurt Angle was doing, kind of giving him that jetpack of kind of being the one that drove over Stone Cold, I thought was basically there for the takings. And
I think
Yeah, I
it's
think
even
that
more
can.
comical that knowing how they do things typically, and we always talk about how literally at the last minute they decide to change their mind. I think
yeah,
Wally was talking earlier about the whole like Taker Lesnar thing at Mania.
yeah,
So they decide things last minute, and even then they still decided that their best course of action was to go with freaking Rikishi.
Well, that's why, like you said, they
It's
relaying it as
insane.
Triple H was the accomplice because
yeah.
Rikishi didn't go over so well.
Well, it's hard to kind of go over well for a guy like that.
Yeah,
And nothing against Rikishi, he actually has great might work.
yeah,
He performs
Yeah,
really
yeah.
well in the ring.
he does.
So it's not like he's a bust of a talent in that sense.
But it was just he wasn't the right fit for that role.
It was just so
Especially with
sudden. It
the
was such a drastic change for a guy like Rikishi.
especially with the Rock not knowing that he did it. You know what I mean? Like if
Well, that was
if
their own little storyline.
no, but if
I did it for The Rock.
but if like the Rock knew it or told him, I think that could have played a little bit better. But with the Rock being as puzzled as he was when he found out, like
I feel like if the buildup was going to be Rock and Austin to WrestleMania, why not have Rock as the accomplice instead of Triple H?
That could have even worked, man.
Like I feel like I get like Triple H and Austin had great matches and it was this that, but it was such a short term storyline, and it was so weird because like 2 months after their big match, they're together as a tag team. It was so strange. Like it was, hey,
yeah.
he was one of those involved running you over, but hey, let's be tag teams. Like that one made no sense to me.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And also during the reveal when Triple H ended up turning, wasn't it that The
Yeah,
Rock that got attacked on his way to the ring?
something like.
So the same dude that he helped was a guy who got hit by a Zamboni or an ice serve resurfacer, you know? And then now the guy you helped is okay. Then Triple H comes out and he teams up, and you're like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, and then it was just like, yeah, like I feel like they sort of lost course as they were going progressing, and like, okay, well, we need to throw somebody else in there.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, so they
so
used Triple H, which was a good pick. Triple H, I think, would have been a good one too. And again, they had limited options.
Yeah, I mean, at that
but
time, like obviously, Rock and Triple H would have probably been the two number one suspects. I would have liked it if they sort of had both of them guilty until proven innocent, like leading hints that it could have been either one of them.
true, but I don't think there would have been as much of a like wow factor with because like Triple H and The Rock and The Big Show were basically the three main suspects, right? Because they were the ones that were in that match with Stone Cold.
Well, what's funny is they never really even brought him out. Like I feel like I think they said Rock had the most to gain by being number one. Like Triple H wasn't even never really considered a suspect. Like even if they were going to do a surprise, like I feel like having more evidence against either one of Rock or Triple H before having the reveal, but it was just like they
Yeah.
tried to put a lot of it on the Rock just because he had the most to gain. Like Triple H was barely even mentioned, and then suddenly he's the accomplice.
So are we all in agreement that Kurt Angle is the one?
Yeah, I think Kurt Angle would have been like, given some of the factors that we talked about, but I think Angle would have been a really good choice if, in fact, if you looked at the timing of when they announced it. Yeah, I think Kurt Angle would have been the right choice.
What do you mean if they know? Kurt Angle is the obvious winner in this. There's no if or like
Yeah.
No,
maybe
I'm
this and
talking I'm
that.
talking about like, if that was the route that they decided to go, like, obviously how we talk about WWE that they didn't plan it a year in advance, it was going to be Rikishi, then yeah.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. In the terms of this, what if Kurt Angle's a dude? Radicals is solid as like a solid plan
Yeah.
B, but that's him.
No, I agree, Kurt Angle.
Okay. So before we end off this episode,
Does anybody have any final comments?
like, okay.
What the hell?
I'm just gonna get that out.
I mean, I can edit it out, but that's just,
Yeah.
what the hell is that?
Just edit it out. Okay. So before we end things off, fuck. I can't get the final comment out. Okay. Okay. So before we end off this episode, fuck, I can't say it.
TJ might have to take over. Watch TJ not be able to hear us now.
Hear what?
Like, AJ can't say the final comments. I think you're gonna have to take over at the end.
I don't even know what the hell his final comments even are. He's kind of going all over the place.
What do you mean I'm going all over the place? Okay, so how do you want to?
Going all over the joke, laughing there? I don't know what the hell's so funny.
Because I was about to ask Baldy if he had any final comment. I just keep thinking about a stupid gift.
Oh.
Okay, so
Oh, man.
as we end this episode, so I think we're all in agreement that Kurt Angle is
We gotta have like a blooper episode of some sort.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't think I can get this one out for this.
AJ, do you have any final comments on this episode?
No. So yeah. So I think we're all in agreement that Kurt Angle is. He should have been the one that drove over Stone Cold Steve Austin. So before we end this episode, Baldy, do you have any final comments?
No, I think we touched on, what was an interesting topic of, again, another one of the famous storylines WWE botched, but we gave him a nice out that if they could go back and redo things of who should have been the one to run over Stone Cold. So no, I think we touched on everything.
TJ?
No, I just really like the fact that we were able to highlight Baldy's passion for Mae Young and the fact that he was really looking forward to what that baby was going to turn out to be, which
You mean
ended
the
up
hand?
being a freaking hand. Like, whose idea was this backstage?
This feels like a Vince Russo idea.
I can't get over the fact that someone thought it was a good idea and it would be absolutely hilarious for her to give birth to a hand. Like, this, like, was this sort of set up like for an Addams family?
I want to know where your head was when this episode was regarding Stone Cold getting hit by a car. How you decide to put Mae Young and sexual chocolate in here?